Is it working? Are we live?
I think we're live.
Hey guys!
I think we are live.
We are live. Welcome to the first E=MC² book club live show. If you're new to my channel, then I'm Emily at a little writer M, and this is my channel, and I'm here with Mollie and Ciara. Do you want to say a little bit about yourselves?
Hi. Hello. My name's Mollie. My channel's Mine and Mollie. Are you putting links and stuff in?
Yes, the links should already be there. I am a technophobe.
Okay.
So...
Links are in the description, but Em might not have done it right, but it's fine. But if they're not in there, she'll put them in there. What else do I say about myself? I don't know.
What's on your channel?
My channel consists of book videos, plot twist.
Whoa!
But mainly consists. Whoa! I know. Consists of fantasy and like thriller-y type. Yeah.
It's a good channel. We highly recommend.
Yeah. I don't always talk like this. I'm a bit more cohesive in my videos because I can edit.
It's not like we've already been streaming for an hour and a half to get ready.
Okay. And then I'm Ciara. My channel is Ciara Foster. I also talk about books as well as food, yoga, all kinds of things. But in terms of books, which is I'm sure what all of you are interested in, I read a little bit of everything. My favourites are contemporaries, literary fiction, classics, and all of that fun stuff. So that's me.
Cool. And now I feel like we should give a quick summary of the book. If you are new to this live show book club idea, we were reading The Memory Police by Yoko Ogawa, and that's what we've been reading this month. So Ciara, do you want to give a synopsis? I feel like you're the best at synopsises.
Oh wow, big boots to fill. So this is the book. I feel I can only give a synopsis when I'm holding the book because I'm just used to doing that in wrap-up. So this is the lovely book that we will read. And this is a dystopian book which essentially takes place on an island which is being sort of overseen by the memory police. And the job of the memory police essentially is that things are slowly taken from existence, and once they're taken, the memory police have to enforce that they are kind of erased from all existence. So that could be anything from a particular type of makeup product or perfume to a complete species like birds, flowers, or even something as big as books or something crazy like that. So lots of things disappear one by one, and the memory police have to erase all existence of them, which is fine. Most people move on and forget about the things, and it's not even as though they're missing, because as soon as they're erased, the people just kind of move on and they don't even remember what it is that was gone. But there are certain people who for some reason can't seem to get rid of the memories, and the memory police essentially kind of round those people up and have to try and get rid of them in order to make sure that no one else remembers what's supposed to be forgotten. So
that was a good synopsis.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
10 out of 10. Much better than I'd have done. So we looked on Goodreads, and the kind of average rating for the book is 3.74. I feel like I would probably give it 3.75, so just a tiny bit above that. What did you guys give it?
5.
Ooh. And then I give it 4, so we've kind of got the range there.
Yeah, although I would say that's quite a positive response. All of us are over 3.75 or above.
All above average.
Yeah. Good way to describe it in our
group. We're a nice group. So we're just going to discuss the book now. If you have anything that you thought or what you rated it, then please leave it in the comments so we can talk with you guys as well. But yeah, let's just dive into discussing the book and what we thought.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
I mean, I have a lot of thoughts. This is my copy of the book. You know when you tab a book and then you forget everything you've written in every tab? That's what happened to me. But I think it was just so interesting to me to think about how integral memory is to our society. Like, obviously this is set in a dystopian society, but it just really makes you think about how important memories are, and like how important for human connection, like human connection and emotional connections are based on shared memories, and what can happen to people and the connections between people when those memories are lost or one person forgets the memories. So I definitely think that was interesting. And it made me think a lot about attachment and how I would be in a world like that. If you knew that every day you woke up and anything could be missing or anything could have disappeared and you just forget, that kind of affect how you attach yourself to things and the attachment you feel for people and objects and places. It was just made me think about how I would exist in that world, and I don't think I'd exist very well. So yeah.
But you might,
yeah, I feel like the bit for me where it really like almost moved me to tears was the bit where books disappeared, because like photographs and books, those were two of the things that disappeared in the novel, and I felt like they're not just things that you remember, they're ways of preserving memories themselves. So when those two went, it really impacted like my response to the book. Like I felt moved to tears by those bits. Yeah, I don't think I'd exist very well in that world. What did you guys think?
Mollie?
Mine was a bit, I had like a weirdly emotional connection to it, and I'll explain why. Like, it's gonna seem completely out of context and completely different, but I think once I explain, like, you might get it a bit. So the feeling that the characters had when they were like things were disappearing and the sense of unknown really reminded me of when I was a lot younger. Like, I really wasn't expecting to have that. So like my mum passed away when I was little, for anyone that wants context. And I used to have like a recurring dream when I was younger, like a repeated dream where I was in like a big shopping centre with my mum, and then like suddenly she was just gone and I was in like my pram by myself. So like I had like the same feelings, like it just really brought up those feelings for me at the start. So I think that's why I had much more of a emotional connection to it. I just wasn't expecting to like be like, yeah, I completely get that feeling. But yeah, throughout it's become one of my favorite books. So
success.
I don't know. Yeah. And it's one that I've turned up a lot of times, like in the bookshop, thinking like I wouldn't like it. And now it's become one of my favorites. So I think that just goes to show that you should always give it a try.
Yeah, it's definitely something I didn't think I would enjoy as much as I did.
Yeah, I feel like I was expecting to enjoy it because I do love dystopians, but at the same time, I didn't know that it would be quite this good, because dystopians can range so much in like how well they deal with the topic, and I feel like this one was so good because it picked one thing and did it really, really well, rather than sort of trying to do too many things. It was really simple in what it tried to do, but it did it so effectively.
Yeah. I think what was interesting about this one as a dystopian is that when I think about like the other dystopians that I've read, like what springs to mind for me is either like Scythe by Neil Shusterman or The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. Like, they took a dystopian society and a subject, and it was kind of almost resolved and there was hope by the end of the novel. Whereas for this one, it was so different. Like, it's definitely a book that has a very sad feel to it. And you're meant, I think, to be kind of caught up in the hopelessness of this society where things are lost. You're not meant to try and find a solution. Like, that was what made it different to other dystopians for me.
That's such a good point. I hadn't even really thought about that, but like that's so true, because they do often have like a very revolutionary style. Like, for example, like The Handmaid's Tale and stuff, like it sort of comes out with a theme of resistance at the end, whereas this one kind of finishes on more of a note of like submitting to the order of what is being done, which is interesting.
Yeah, I think also like with those dystopians, there's always like a really kind of dynamic, vibrant, revolutionary protagonist, and this was kind of just a protagonist that, well, she didn't have a name. You didn't feel like she wasn't fighting to end anything. She was almost kind of just swept up along in it, and so it was a kind of different dystopian protagonist also to what I'm used to. But I did like it, actually.
Also, for anyone that's just joining in, we're currently in like a non-spoiler section of the live.
Yeah,
but we
we'll
will get to a spoiler section. Mm-hmm. Go on, Kira.
Okay, sorry, I thought my internet was freezing, so I didn't want to start speaking. So basically, I obviously really liked it. I feel like we've already said, it is obviously a dystopian that feels quite different. It's simplistic, but I think it really manages to challenge your perception of memory, I think.
Yeah.
It's one that, like, I feel like it makes you realize, like Em said, how important memory is in a way that you wouldn't have even considered. Because, for example, I would never view my experience of like birds as a memory, but there's like a pigeon that comes and sits outside the house every day and eats food, and obviously I do have a memory of it coming back every single day, but it's not something that I'm like, wow, what a great memory. But if that was like sort of removed from existence, what kind of hole would that leave? And I feel like it kind of takes all of those simple things, the things that are removed from existence are, up until, like you said, we remove like photographs and books, they don't seem like huge things, like that you couldn't live without. And yet, as like those things are gradually taken away, you realize how different existence becomes when you don't have all of these other things.
Like collectively.
And it's like that kind of distance, and I think it really made me think about that, which I think was very impactful.
Yeah.
And another thing
No, go on.
That we'll talk about probably in a little bit is the fact that the main character, author, and part of the book is as her manuscript, and I felt like that was really interesting as well, which I did really like. Whenever books in the past, like for example, Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, I hated the bits that were her fan fiction, and I kind of skipped them. In this, I really liked them.
Yeah, it definitely grew on me.
Yeah, it grew on me near the end, when almost like it almost like at the end made me think, oh my god, like the novel was actually kind of like foreshadowing.
Yeah. I think at the first I struggled to see what the point of that manuscript within the book was, but by the end I felt like it was almost a metaphor for what was happening to the main character. Because, well, no, actually I'll mention that when we get into the spoiler bit, because I don't want to spoil it. Also, I just want to put this comment on the screen. Did I do that right? Did I do it? Yeah, I did.
Yeah.
Because Natalia said that she thought the main character was going to try and stop the memory police, and I actually thought she was going to do that too. Like, if you're looking at, going back to what dystopians are usually like with the revolution. Yeah, I definitely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt like it was a very conscious thing that she didn't do that, and I think potentially it was on the author's part that she was trying to explore what these like sort of fascist and authoritarian societies are like for real people who live in them. Because yes, you'll have some people who do act against the regime, but for most people it's just about trying to keep your head down, not get in trouble, and most people don't sort of have a big uprising because it's just not feasible. And I feel like she kind of explored a more realistic view of how it is people living in types of regimes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think dystopians could almost fall into that trap as a genre of always having the same kind of arc where there is a resistance. But if you're looking at a dystopian as something that is like maybe our society, or a different kind of a model of society but different, you have to think about how real people would react to those kind of situations. And you probably, like, I mean, I don't know what I would end up doing, but most people wouldn't resist. So yeah, I agree.
Especially because things
there's a comment that's just come through from the Cat Lady Book Nook that I thought it's something that you spoke about earlier.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think quite a lot of elements of the book really reminded me of when I read The Book Thief, like the book burning, and there were certain quotes in it, and the way the R was hidden inside the protagonist's house. Like, I definitely agree with that. I got that a similar kind of parallel from that as well. Definitely agree.
Yeah. I feel like it was so subtle, and that's what happens in these societies. Like, for example, in Nazi Germany, it wasn't like one day, it was just at the height of World War II. it happened gradually over time, and before you know it, people have submitted to this way of life that they fundamentally don't agree with, but there's no way for them to act up against it because everyone is just kind of an individual person, and they have to think about their own interest, and like food is scarce, there's not a lot of money, people have to think about protecting their family and loved ones, and it's not like all of a sudden the memory police had gotten rid of everything, but gradually it became that way, and at first it would have just been like one thing, and then you know, it's like, so I feel like that's kind of why there's like less resistance than maybe you would expect from a typical dystopian.
Yeah, because I think there were definitely, as you said, like a lot more parallels to certain points in history than other dystopians. I didn't read Scythe and think, yeah, this reminds me of a certain point in history. Like, it definitely felt almost more realistic, which I guess ties into what we were saying about the fact that it doesn't really have a solution. It's just kind of an exploration more than a solution.
For sure. It's like, it's very interesting. A lot of dystopians as well, they feel like they're set in a different time and there's some connections to our world, but not many, whereas in this one, there wasn't really anything, factors or mentions of government that felt unrealistic. Like, it all felt like things that you could relate to in real life.
Yeah, and all the things that disappeared were things that we engage with and we know, and we could really put ourselves in the shoes of those people existing in that society and what it would feel like for those things to just disappear and not exist anymore. I think it's really interesting. Like, when I picked the book for this live show, I didn't think it was going to happen the way it happened when they, like, how things disappeared, the way they woke up. I guess, is this a spoiler? Is it a spoiler? We're moving on to spoilers. Yes, I feel like this is a bit of a spoiler. Yeah?
Let's do it.
Sorry, I'm just checking the synopsis in the book.
Well, because I didn't know before I went into it, and I had read the synopsis, so maybe it is a spoiler. But when things
spoiler section now.
When things disappear in this world, you wake up and you know something's disappeared, like there must be an inkling, and you feel that something's missing, but you don't know what it is. And so you have to go about your day until you figure out what's missing. And that is so interesting to me. Like, imagine that, just waking up and knowing that something was missing. And like, you'd have such a climate of anxiety over what it was, and you'd realize maybe in those moments what it is that you value most, which is interesting.
Like when you've forgotten something that you've forgotten, like missing the bag, and you're like, I know something's not here, but I can't remember what I've forgotten.
Yeah, like that weird feeling. Like, if I woke up and I could tell something had disappeared, I'd be like, please don't be hot chocolate, please don't be cats, please don't be books. Like, that's what goes through my head.
Oh, can I also ask you guys, because it's just suddenly reminded me what you just said, Em, but like, what I thought was really interesting, and I don't know if you guys noticed as well, but the way that things disappeared. Obviously, you have an inkling that something's disappeared, but it hasn't. It still exists. If you wake up and birds have disappeared, birds haven't disappeared. They still are around.
Yeah.
For example, there was one where flowers had or roses had disappeared, and it wasn't that they'd disappeared, they were floating away, but people are complicit in the disappearance. Like, they just kind of they're cutting off their own roses and throwing them down the river, and so it's not as if you wake up and suddenly the flowers are gone from the garden.
You just know.
However, although, for example, there's that in the book, there is that rose garden and the wind blows only the roses away. So in that sense, I did think that was quite a cool feature. Like, if it's in your own home, it doesn't do it, but if it's in quite a public space, and like that seems to do it for you, which I found it was quite interesting.
There's definitely something quite eerie about all of these people, because it seemed to quite a lot of the time happen in the river. Like, people would flock almost in like masses to get rid of the things that had to disappear. And that, for me, especially with the book burning, where everyone was bringing their books to be burnt, it was very eerie image that it created of people just accepting that they had to get rid of these things. Because it was definitely
that, like, the memory police might come, but they wouldn't have, like, they couldn't get rid of all the books at once. They got rid of the library, but it's like there's almost an uncontrollable urge to get rid of the thing, even though there's no like explanation for it, but I just thought that kind of made it more impactful because it wasn't as though there was just some kind of magic disappearance and all of a sudden books were gone. Like people had to get rid of them, and like.
But I think that also goes to show like the fear that the actual citizens of the society had surrounding like the government. Like they were so terrified of what the memory police would do that they were like, fine, that's it, like roses are gone, get rid of them all. Like they're willing to comply because the fear of the unknown of what happens to the people that don't comply with the memory police, like is so much stronger than like, well, what if we just kept them?
Yeah, definitely. And I really agree with that comment. It did feel like at points people were in a trance. Sometimes it was kind of hard to distinguish whether the protagonist was like halfway between the people that could remember and the people that were just in this trance. Like I felt like she was sometimes more aware of what was going on than just the other people, but obviously she didn't remember as much as the people that remembered everything.
It's like she was aware.
Yeah.
It's like she could sense the gap, but she couldn't remember what filled it, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I wonder if that was because of like her mother telling her in advance that these things happened. I really liked the addition of her mother being someone that remembered everything that was forgotten. I think that really definitely made the story more intriguing right from the word go. Like it definitely hooked me from the word go.
Yeah, for sure.
That was actually something I highlighted in the book. I actually highlighted and wrote on this book, blasphemy, was that the first 3 chapters had first lines which are so memorable and so kind of sum up the whole chapter. Like in chapter 1, it was, I sometimes wonder what disappeared first among all of the things that vanished from the island. So that's such a like captivating first line. And then the second one was, my mother died and then my father died, and since then I have lived all alone in this house. Like I just thought she has such a talent for writing first lines. I was really impressed by the writing style. I've actually never read a translated novel, I don't think, before.
You have?
I don't think I have.
What was?
Beartown is translated from Swedish.
Oh yeah, Beartown. Definitely nothing like this though. I really enjoyed it. I thought her writing style was so good.
Later on, when we talk a bit more about like the actual ending of the book, the points that you were saying about the mum kind of helping her remember things, I think ties quite nicely in with my point on the ending, but I'll talk about that when we talk about the ending.
I don't even know how I'm going to summarize my thoughts about that. The ending was so interesting.
It was so interesting, as was the entire book.
Yeah, definitely. I think it was very clever how, I remember you were saying that you had something to say on this, Ciara, how the author had to deal with the fact that every time she took something away from the world, she then had to continue writing the world with these things not existing, which was very clever and must have taken a lot of work.
So there was like a quote on page 93, and it said, like it was just part of a normal conversation. It wasn't part of a conversation about things being taken or forgetting things. And she just said, oh, that'll be a great way to kill 2 creatures with 1 stone, because at this point birds were gone. And so she had to kind of rephrase that. And it wasn't a point, like no reference that was made, because that was just the way that language had developed surrounding this thing that was written. And I just thought that was really interesting and kind of reminded me like how people's lives and like vocabulary and everything had to constantly shift in order to accommodate what was being taken.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of like logistics that go into planning a world like this. Like one of the things that really struck me was when you're talking about like lack of attachment, like people couldn't become attached to their livelihoods, and the way that livelihoods could just disappear, and everything that you commit your life to and your life's purpose could just disappear. Like there was a hat maker, which seems quite trivial, but if you're a hat maker and then hats disappear, you have to really reframe your whole existence and just comply with that. And I found that to be really interesting, the way she wrote about that.
Or even, for example, like with our main character, like she's an author and then books disappear. So she has to kind of like take her skill set in a different kind of way, but like it's never going to live up to the same feeling of when she was like writing books, because that was like her passion.
Yeah, I felt for her so much when that happened. Like if I woke up and I couldn't write anymore, I don't know what I'd do. That was a moment where I really started to connect with the main character. I felt it on a really emotional level.
It was an interesting one because I feel like you knew from the start that books were probably gonna disappear at some point, because I feel like she wouldn't have made the main character be an author if it wasn't gonna be kind of taken away from her. But I do think, like, as we're all readers, and at least one of us is like a published author, it's like it's weird to think about being.
Yeah. I definitely think if you are a reader, which I imagine if you're watching this live stream, you probably do like to read books, then I think this will impact you maybe more than if you didn't read books, because it really delves into the importance of books and what they offer the world, and I really liked that aspect.
And you're getting that information reading a book in which books disappear, which kind of helps you to remind you how important books like the one that you are currently reading are, if that makes sense. So,
yeah. Now, there's a big point that me and Emma have a very difference of opinion on.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And that the characters within the book don't have like names. So, for example, R is literally just the letter R, who is our main character's editor. We don't know our main character's name. Her mum's just her mum, and then the old man that's generally in the book is the old man, and like Em said, there's a hat maker that's referred to as the hat maker. I personally really enjoyed that aspect of the book. Em did not.
I would say, like, I didn't not like it. I think we have a very different opinion on like why that was used. Yeah.
Do you want to go first?
I mean, yeah, okay. For me, like, for me, the fact that there was no concrete names. I mean, I didn't really notice the protagonist one as much, because if I'm honest, I don't think, sometimes I'm midway through a book and it's never really occurred to me anyway what the protagonist's name is, because you're them, if that makes sense. But it definitely struck me as unusual straight away with the old man and just her editor being called R, or her mother, her father, you never really got to delve into really beyond surface level attributes of these people. And for me, I thought that maybe represented the fact that in a world where things can disappear all the time and where memories can disappear, people are almost wary to form meaningful attachments, or they don't want to get too attached to people's names and like what makes people, because that could just disappear in any given moment. So that's how I like interpreted that, but I know that Mollie interpreted it different.
See, at first, I got like halfway through the book without properly noticing that none of the characters really had names. It wasn't until I properly started thinking of the way she referred to the old man, who is like supposed to be this really close family friend, as the old man, that it made me really think, oh, like, I wonder why. And then I found it a lot more powerful, because the disattachment to the character names almost made it feel like the emphasis was more on the disappearances, and I feel like that was really powerful, because then you weren't as attached to the characters as you were to what was happening to them.
Yeah, so you think it was like a lack of attachment to the characters. I think it was between the characters. Yeah, I can kind of see it that way as well, to be honest. I feel like I might be changing.
Yeah, so I mean, you're not thinking of the characters so much as like, oh, like when you have such a heartfelt connection to a character, like, don't get me wrong, that's still such a thing within this book because of the experiences that happen to them. Like, you feel their emotions way more, as opposed to like being like, this person's like this. They kind of all experience things in a similar kind of way, and you really feel that.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. I agree. I think also, like, just like touching upon that, one of the saddest things for me was that obviously you just said like they all experience this in the same way. I think maybe you were meant to, or maybe you weren't meant to, but at the beginning I felt like the people that could remember, because we've only just joined the live show, there's people in this society that forget everything, things disappear, they lose their memories. And there are some people which are like targeted by the memory police that don't lose their memories, and they have to watch everyone else forget about these things. And at the beginning I thought, I think it would be so much better if you could remember, like you can remember all these things. But then when throughout the story, when R and the protagonist were trying to keep their connection to each other really strong, but you could see the heartbreak of being someone that remembers all of these things and having to watch the people that you care about not remember those things. I think I changed my mind like as the book went on, and by the end I kind of think I would have preferred to be one of the members of society that did forget, because I think it's even worse to watch everyone that you love forget about it and not be able to either share it with you, or they don't remember it for you to see that.
Especially since the majority of the population are those who can't remember, and it's only the select few that can.
Yeah.
And you can't enjoy things, even though you know they existed. You can't enjoy them anymore, like, because they're pretty much gone. Even if maybe a few people have kept a few mementos. For example, if you'd kept one book but all the other books were gone, it's not really the same, because you're not able to, say, for example, like get excited about new releases or read loads of different things. So even if you remember, the context in which you then go forth is different because everyone else is forgetting.
Yeah, definitely. I think also it's just occurred to me, and maybe I just missed this, but did we ever really find out what happened to the people that got taken away by the memory police and that did?
No.
Because I think that's really powerful that you never find that out. It's another
I know.
kind of
I agree.
that's unsolved.
I think the only clue that you get is what happens to the main character's mum.
Yeah, I can't even. What happened to her mum?
So she was taken away to help with research, and then her body was returned to them with like notes sending condolences.
Yeah, it's interesting though, because when you go on.
It was earlier on, obviously, in the days of the memory police, and she said that like at the beginning they were taking a lot more care to make it seem as though they were taking people for research purposes, and then they would like conveniently die. And then I think she said like as time went on, they were just rounding people up with no warning.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say actually.
Probably not returning them to their families or anything.
A point that I quite often forget about within the book, because it's really not explored that much, is the fact that the old man gets taken away by the memory police for a few days, but he doesn't really talk about his experience, because it was almost like trauma. It's obviously traumatic, but he kind of brushes it off as like it's no big thing. But then I'm kind of questioning, is that to protect himself or to protect others? But it's really not something that's like explored. But I think that's quite powerful as well, because again, it's like the almost unknown of what goes on makes you as the reader really question it.
Yeah, and it definitely, as the book and as the story and the timeline moved on, it went from the memory police kind of acting as if they were doing something good for society, and obviously it being more like, oh, we're taking you away for research, to very violent towards the end. Like there was a scene of all those people being taken away in the truck. And that was another thing that reminded me of like The Book Thief and that time in history. And that was a really violent image compared to the image of the mum just being taken away and for a seemingly positive purpose. Like it definitely, the force behind the memory police changed.
I'm sure it mentioned that the mum was taken away in like a very fancy car, like the car turned up, and it was really nice.
Yeah.
Black car, and then she was returned, obviously. But like they were obviously putting a lot of effort into making it seem like a positive thing, like you said. And I think maybe even just a change in the images of the vehicles from this fancy, stretched out black car to just like a truck taking loads of people away.
But I think like that.
Do you know what's really weird? I've literally just opened straight to the page where it starts talking about when the mum gets taken away.
That is
So it says the car sent the next morning by the memory police was terribly elegant, jet black and polished to a brilliant shine. It seemed as large as a house.
It's definitely purposeful. I think at the beginning, when that started to happen and when her mum got taken away, the memory police and this kind of regime, they were trying to convince people that it was a good thing. But then once you get further into like a regime or a society like this and you have more power, you don't have to convince people. You just tell people what they have to do and they comply. And I think that's
like it was
really
all,
powerful.
It was all very much for show. So, for example, the driver of the car wore like white gloves, and it was all very like pristine and elegant, and everything was very clean. Whereas, like later on, as you say, they get violently taken away in a truck, and there's almost no care to like the people being taken away. So,
like at that point, they've sort of gathered the power that they need. The regime is like fully in its like control, and so they don't really need to convince people anymore. And so they don't need to put this facade because
they didn't need to convince anyone anymore. Like they had the power. I didn't even think about that until we just started talking about it, but that is really interesting.
And obviously, like you see that in the life industry as well, with like obviously politicians come into power, they usually do it by being charismatic and convincing people that there's something wrong in society and that they can offer a better solution. But then once they've gained that power, things change dramatically, and all of a sudden, people's freedoms are being controlled and all kinds of things. But by that point, it's kind of like the people have kind of opened themselves up to it by voting them in, and they have no control to stop it anymore. So it's definitely got so many parallels with like real life.
Yeah, there was a quote from the editor on page 231, which I felt was like quite relevant there, and it said, "We're all free to do as we choose with our own memories," which I felt was quite a weird quote, because to me the whole point of the book was the opposite, and I found it weird that character said that. I don't know if you guys picked up on that.
You are free to do what you want with your memories until the memories are taken.
But also I kind of feel like his point with that, if you really think about it, is because a lot of people choose to go along with the memory police. Like people are getting rid of their memories. Like it's not like they don't forget, because when things start to go missing, they do still use the name of the thing that's going, but because they choose to get rid of it. Whereas R, for example, chose maybe not to. Like he's kept hold of a bunch of things that weren't like were supposed to be missing. So I guess in that sense, I do understand why he was like, we choose what to do with our own memories. But it just goes to show how people's mindsets can really differentiate, because some people are so consumed in that like following what everyone else is doing, and it's almost like I said earlier, like fear. And it's got to take someone really brave to like actively choose not to go along with that.
I do feel like there were some inconsistencies in how much choice people had. So, for example, they mentioned at the very beginning, and then it comes up again in a conversation between the protagonist and R about perfume, and they have her mother's old perfume, and she says, I can't smell anything, it's just like musty water, there's no smell, it doesn't bring back anything. But then later on as well, they also have some old sweets that are forgotten about, and then she and she can taste the flavour, which in my mind shouldn't really be that different from being able to smell something and all that kind of
But then also you've got to think that with the perfume, because it's her mum's, it has a much more of a personal connection. So almost like the smell of it might bring so much pain to her, whereas the sweets don't, they bring more joy.
Yeah, that's true.
So
there's so many like complexities, and that's kind of why I do wish the book was maybe like slightly longer, or maybe just had like a little bit more depth and exploration of like how exactly this all works, because I do feel like there's definitely room for you to notice some inconsistencies with like, is there any choice, or do you just go along with it? Is it your mindset, or I just don't know.
And like, are you born with the ability to retain the memories, or does that like develop? I'd quite like to know more about that. I definitely think it could have been longer. I think a lot of books, like I think if I think of the last dystopian book in was it called The Toll in the side series, that was definitely a bit too long. Whereas this one, I feel like it could have been another 100 pages, and I would have really appreciated that. Should we talk about the ending?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anyone want to like summarize what happens, like what the ending kind of is, before we discuss it? Because I feel like it is quite complex.
I can try. So I feel like At a certain point, the things that are taken change from being objects and to being people's bodies. So the first thing that happens is that she wakes up one day and she notices there's something on the left side of her hip, and she's like, God, what is this? I'm trying to take it off, but she can't. And then she realizes that it's the same as her right leg, and she notices that her left leg has gone missing and is gone. It still exists, but it's like it's nothing to her because she can't use it anymore. And then I think right arms go missing, and gradually more and more bodily things start to be taken. Even though they technically still exist, it's like they might as well not be there. And it's also interesting that these things going or being taken by the memory police is what allows more people to be taken away, because it was said that the people who could remember couldn't sort of fake not having these things. It's like the people who actually were forgetting that they had a left leg had a certain way of walking and going about their new life because they only had one leg in their minds, whereas the people who had their memories couldn't pretend properly, convincingly enough, and so more and more people were taken away. But essentially, the whole body essentially disappears until our main character is a voice, and at that point, she essentially submits and is just kind of left in a room along with all of the other things that have been preserved. So.
Yeah, it was, I think, one of the most not shocking, because you knew that the book was gonna, there were definitely foreshadowing, you knew that that was gonna happen, but it was a bit of a shocking ending, with no obvious resolution, and it was a very sad ending, I thought.
Yeah, I finished the book this morning and I ended up crying just because it was so abrupt and so emotional at the same time.
Yeah,
but I think
I so agree.
The feeling that I got from it, and this is why I found it quite emotional, is because the thought that went through my head when I finished it was like, oh, is this what people with like Alzheimer's and dementia feel like, with their memories slowly drifting away? And for example, especially near the end, R, who is the main character's editor, tries to help our main character like bring back her memories. And again, with the mother, I feel like that could have been a big, like, that's what I feel like with that tying in, like the mum's trying to be like, look, this happens to a lot of people, it's something that's very common, like try and hold on to these things. But then her mum's not there, so then it makes it harder and harder. And then at the end, she just slips away, and I'm like, it was so heartbreaking.
Yeah, I definitely see that. I think it's also quite interesting that obviously you've got this main storyline, and then you've also got the manuscript that was going on throughout. And in the manuscript, the main character in manuscript within the story lost her voice, and that was the thing that disappeared, and she kind of deteriorated completely because she lost her voice. And then in the actual storyline, people lost everything but their voice and deteriorated, and it was like a complete contrast in what they lost, but kind of a very similar ending.
Yeah. And like, I don't think the book itself actually made sense until the end. Like, once the end finally happened, it kind of made me reflect on like the story that the main character was telling. It was almost foreshadowing in a sense, but it was almost like she was imagining what that would feel like, and then it was becoming massively her reality. And I feel like you could also feel that more and more throughout the story that she was telling as well.
Yeah, definitely. I just, no, you go.
Sorry, I think it's interesting to know for how many years the memory police had been working, because it would seem as though the removal of bodies entirely and then of like voices and just people is kind of the conclusion of the cycle of the memory police, because what more is there to take? And surely the memory police are equally affected and so have disappeared as well. So it's like, it would have been interesting to kind of know like what cycle took from when the thing disappeared to when people went entirely.
And do we assume that at some point this society like everyone remembered everything and none of this existed. I kind of think it would have been quite nice or not nice, it would have been sad, but to have a flashback to that time when society was completely like everything existed, and the difference in the way people treated each other, the difference in the way that people were and how they thought about life. And I think it would have been quite interesting to see how people's sense of self and sense of memory and life changed as society changed. I think that could have been interesting.
There's a lot of like, that's another reason I feel like it could have just done with being a tiny bit longer, just to give a little bit more context and explanation, because it was such a like in-depth concept and there was so much stuff, and I think she did a great job, but there were certain bits where I just wish there was a little bit more detail or history and exploration. But like overall it was obviously great, and I think the conclusion was very like haunting, because like we've said, it kind of challenges what you expect from dystopian. There is no revolution, it's like a complete submission to what's going on, and it's very haunting but like very impactful.
Yeah, I think when stories tie themselves up with a neat little bow, like you can kind of move on after the reading experience is over. Like, I mean, sometimes you can't, but for the most part you can just get on with your day and move on. But with books like this, you can't, because they just continue to make you think.
Yeah, like for example, we all finished this like last night, this morning, and it wasn't until we all came together and properly started talking about it before this live show, and like just thinking of some points, that we started to discover more things, or like there was things that you'd thought that I hadn't and I'd thought that you two hadn't, and then us sharing our thoughts on the whole thing, it's made us see it a lot broadly. And I think this is going to be a book that I'm going to be thinking about for a very, very long time.
This is an interesting comment that kind of links into what we were just. What do you think of this? I took the whole book as a warning to society that if you keep getting rid of things, eventually you lose everything, even down to your voice. That's such an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah,
I think that's, in general, like that is a theme throughout dystopia, that they sometimes offer a kind of a warning to current societies. Definitely the case with a lot of the ones I've read.
I was also going to say that I feel like you, Molly, just talked about how we've just spoken about this as a collective, is sort of a good reason why this was such a perfect book club read, because the collective experience, like we said, is kind of what this book is founded on, and just our ability to discuss this and sort of bounce ideas off each other, and for each of our collective memories to come together in forming like an opinion of the book is just like, so it just makes you think about what the characters had lost, and what they didn't even necessarily realize they would, because wow,
I didn't even think about that. But like when you think about every conversation you have in everyday life, most of them revolve around either shared memories you have with that person of things that have happened, or shared memories that you don't think of as memories, but that if you're talking about a particular book that you've both read, I wouldn't necessarily have thought about that as a memory, but now I would. Like, it's something that you both remember that exists. And so it's such a focal point of conversations and connections, that it does make you think about the characters in that world and how they would be different to us.
Yeah. Like, I don't know how I would go about living in that world. Like, how would you form friendships?
Yeah, like friendship is so based on collective experience and memory.
Like, I think our generation is like very much nostalgia focused, I feel like.
Yeah.
I feel like we all just properly love nostalgia. Thinking about, like, for example, we obviously didn't know each other as like children or when we were in school, but I bet we all watched the same TV shows, read the same books, and had similar experiences that then you can kind of like bond over and share. And imagine if, like, I don't know, for example, like Tracy Beaker or something never existed, and it's like that's something that so many
people,
and it's these things, they're not like, you don't constantly think about the memory of watching or reading Tracy Beaker, but it's something that has like, that was there and was kind of like affected your sort of upbringing and life. And then if those things kind of disappear, and I think the fact that it is the small things is just
definitely
kind of more
like, it makes you appreciate more the things that you would say were trivial, because you realize that actually they're not trivial, and that people are kind of just collections of all the things that have happened to them, no matter how small, which is quite deep. But I feel like that is something that I definitely thought about while reading it. Like if I took away all of the tiny things that make me, like what do you become after that?
Yeah. Without all of your memories and experiences, who are you as a person? And I feel like that's kind of why she disappeared, because once you take away all of those memories and experiences that have formed your character, you are essentially nothing, which is quite a devastating.
Which is why it was so sad.
Yeah.
It's weird because it's not something you could relate to by the end, but I felt so strongly as if I could relate to it. Like it, putting myself in that situation, like for a second, was kind of shocking. Like it really was emotional.
I think almost your connection to your memories became so strong at that point that your then desire to never be able to relate to her experience, because it just seems so horrific, is what makes the ending so impactful.
Yeah. And I don't necessarily think it's like, obviously we're talking about it like as if it's a really negative read, and I don't actually think that that's what I'm going to take away from the book. I think if anything, I'm going to look at the little things in life and really appreciate them more after reading this book. Like it has a very melancholy, like sad vibe to the book, but the actual what you take away from it, I think, is more of a positive, inspirational like takeaway from the book. I don't know if that's how you two felt, but I definitely felt that way.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Yeah. I wouldn't say like I felt overly sad while reading the book. It had sad parts, but I think it was more just like perspective shifting.
Yeah.
Which I think I'll take away.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I agree. I don't think the whole thing was sad. I feel like getting into it was quite sad because you're getting used to how these characters are feeling, and the end was obviously very abrupt and very sad, but the whole like middle portion and seeing the relationship between like our main character, the old man, and R collectively, and how they all try and help each other in a world that's like slipping away and becoming much more of a struggle, especially since another point that we didn't mention, which is quite a big part, is the fact that spring disappears. So they live in a constant winter throughout the whole book, and then it becomes a lot more difficult for them to get certain food, and you can just really feel that build up throughout the entire thing. And coming to think of it more now, I know you guys think that this book could be longer, and realistically, because I loved the book so much, I would want it to be longer, but I think with the ending being so abrupt and how it was, it's even more impactful because that itself makes you come away from it thinking about the book and constantly thinking about it because it was so abrupt.
Yeah.
That really gives you more of a chance to properly think about it. And
yeah.
I think if I had it longer, I don't think. Shall I go? I don't think like I would have a longer ending. I think I would just have more of like a prequel sort of info kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Kira?
I was just going to say, I feel like the abruptness of the ending is potentially our only real chance as a reader to get an insight into what it might be like to lose something, because it just happens so quickly. And like it's like that's gone now, like the whole story, the characters, everything is done, and it does happen so fast, almost in the same way that things disappear without warning. So I feel like, again, like you, if I had it longer, it would have been more so in a little bit of extra context towards the beginning. But overall, like, talented author, and like it was incredible.
Yeah, do you know what, Kira? That's an absolutely brilliant point about the end. Like, I wouldn't have even thought of like, oh yeah, that's how they felt.
Yeah, no, me neither. But now that you've said it, I'm like, oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, wow, that makes so much sense.
I feel I literally just thought of that now, so I'm guessing it's our collective conversation that's led me there.
Just giving us all the credit, like sharing out the credit. That's nice. What did you guys think of the tsunami? Because I thought that was very random and also
what the earthquake, like, ferry sink.
Yeah, and also obviously I don't have an in-depth knowledge of tsunamis, even though I have a geography degree. I don't really know that much about them. Calling myself out, but they seemed to only like run for about 30 seconds, and then they were completely out of the way of the tsunami. And that, I don't know, that didn't seem very accurate to me. The tsunami, I struggled with a little bit, I think.
I feel like it was a bit, going back to my degree, I'm going to chuck in pathetic fallacy because I just love that. But I do feel like it was a bit pathetic fallacy-ish in the sense that it was almost as if there were certain things that the memory police hadn't been able to get rid of. For example, the old man's ferry. And so at that point, kind of like the wind taking away the roses, the wave kind of swept in to take away what the memory police have been unable to get rid of, because they're so powerful that they really withstand them.
Yeah.
But I do agree, maybe on like an actual ecological accurate level, it wasn't quite what a real tsunami would have been like. But
yeah, because it had all of the build up of a really powerful tsunami, of the like wave drawing back, and then they like legged it for like about 20 seconds and seemed to outrun it.
They do have earthquakes and tsunamis and things relatively often in Japan, so I don't know if they're of like varying degrees, and maybe like maybe it was what one was like, but thankfully I've never experienced one. So
yeah, I don't think I have anything left in particular to say about it. Or should we move on to just like introducing the next book?
Do you want to?
Yeah.
If you've got any questions now, while we talk about our next book, and then if you have any more questions on this book, we can get to that before the end.
Yeah. If they have any more comments or questions, then we'll answer them in a second. So the next book that we'll be discussing is Mollie's pick.
Yes, so it's my pick, and the live show will therefore be on my channel on, did we agree on Sunday the 2nd of August? Is that the first Sunday?
Yes.
Yeah, so Sunday the 2nd of August on my channel at 8 p.m. BST, same as this. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. Would you like to change it?
I'm sorry, I can't make it because I've got to go for a birthday party for my cat. No, I'm joking.
I mean, it's something I do. I get that. The book I've chosen is Followers by Megan Angelo. And this is, I can't remember it's more of like a speculative thriller, kind of on similar speculation as The Gracia, but I don't think it's as like fantastical. But this basically follows a girl called Marlo and her mother, and they're both in the public eye in 2051, and they have a TV show, but Marlo herself absolutely hates it. She hates being in the public eye, and she hates having people see everything she does. And Marlo actually discovers a secret about her birth, which then leads to a chain of events that becomes very terrifying and a race against time, which just picking it up, like seeing the cover, I wouldn't have thought that this was a thriller of any sort. I just literally picked it up, I'm not gonna lie, because the cover was pink. But then when I was in the shop and read the synopsis, I was like, oh my god, this sounds incredible. And I remember I literally think I messaged both of you about it straight away, like, oh my god, this book sounds so good.
Yeah.
So I had to pick it, and that's what we're going to be reading.
I'm very excited for that one, I have to say. I feel like it's going to be completely different pace to this one.
Yeah.
And a different tone. So that will be the next pick, because we're going like me, then Mollie, then Ciara. So the month after that will be Ciara's pick. But yeah, I feel like, aside from saying that that's going to be on the 2nd of August, Emily's cat's birthday, at 8 p.m. on Mollie's channel, that's all we've got left to say. Anything else that you guys want to say?
Someone said that they read this earlier in the year and it was really good.
Ooh.
It hasn't come through yet, but it's on here.
Yeah, I can't see on
yeah, no, it's a bit delayed, but it's on my live footage. I was just going on to see if there was any questions, but I don't think there is.
Yeah, I feel like I enjoyed this discussion.
So did
as
I.
Mollie and Ciara can vouch for, I was extremely nervous because live shows give me anxiety. But actually, this was so fun.
So it actually was.
So thank you so much for watching. Thank you to Mollie and Ciara for joining me on my channel. And if you haven't checked out their channels, then please do, because they're two of my favourite booktubers and you will love their channels. I absolutely promise. So Yes. Those links will be in there. If they're not already in the description, I'll get Ciara to help me figure it out, as I have done with everything to do with this live show. But yeah, are you guys ready to end? Shall we end it?
Yeah, thanks guys for watching.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much for watching and chatting with us. And I'm glad that you all enjoyed discussing the book. But yeah, we'll see you next month. Bye, guys.
Bye.